There are moments in life when everything feels quiet, too quiet. The calls stop, the doors close, the people fade. And in the silence, you start to ask, was I forgotten? But what if I told you? You were never forgotten. You were being hidden. And not just hidden for a season, but preserved for a sacred unveiling. If you're watching this, it's not an accident. Your spirit was drawn here. Because you're not just anyone, you're chosen, and chosen ones don't follow ordinary paths. Maybe you've felt it your whole life. That strange disconnection from the world around you. You walk into rooms and feel like you don't belong. Not because you're less, but because you carry more. You've endured silence, not because you had nothing to say, but because heaven was training you to speak only when it mattered. And now, it matters. You've wondered why relationships ended without reason, why doors closed right before you entered, why seasons shifted with no warning, and maybe why your soul always craved something more, something holy. But here's what you need to know. You were not being rejected. You were being refined. You were not being punished. You were being prepared. You were not being delayed. You were being developed, like Enoch, the one who walked so closely with God that he didn't even taste death. You've been invited into a hidden journey, not loud, not seen, not understood, but sacred, because when God is about to reveal something powerful through a person, he doesn't start with applause. He starts with isolation. He doesn't push you onto the stage. He pulls you into the secret place. The silence wasn't a void. It was strategy. Your invisibility wasn't neglect. It was protection. Your loneliness wasn't rejection. It was intimacy with the one who chose you before time began. And now, that divine silence is shifting. You can feel it, a stirring, a pull, a pressure deep inside. Something in you knows. It's time to stop shrinking, time to stop apologizing for your anointing, time to stop waiting for permission to walk in what heaven already approved. This isn't just another message. This is a confirmation. You're not watching because you're curious. You're here because your spirit has been craving this exact word. And if your spirit bears witness with this truth, if something inside you already knows this word is yours, then do something simple but powerful. Type 777 in the comments right now. Not for performance, but as a sign to yourself and to heaven that you're ready. Ready to stop shrinking, ready to stop doubting, ready to step fully into the purpose that's been waiting for you all along. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, because what's coming next isn't just content, it's calling. You weren't meant to blend in. You were chosen to break through. And today, we begin uncovering exactly what that means. There is a kind of silence that isn't empty. It's sacred. A silence so intentional, it could only have been orchestrated by heaven. And if you've ever walked through a season where you felt invisible, where no one called, no one noticed, no one celebrated, where your presence seemed to disappear from rooms that once welcomed you, then this message is for you. You weren't erased. You were entrusted. When God chooses someone for something that cannot be measured by human applause, something eternal, weighty, and divine, the first thing he often does is remove them from public view, not to abandon them, but to preserve them, because what he places inside of his chosen vessels is too valuable to be exposed before it is ready. Like a precious seed planted deep in the soil, your life has been growing in silence. Think of it. Before Moses ever stood before Pharaoh, he spent 40 years in the wilderness. Before David ever held the crown, he was tending sheep, unseen, uninvited. Before Joseph stood in the palace, he was locked in a prison, misunderstood and forgotten. This is not new. This is divine strategy. God hides what he plans to reveal. He removes what he intends to restore. He conceals what he is still perfecting, because the higher the calling, the deeper the preparation. And you, chosen one, have been walking through this divine pattern, whether you realized it or not. You were moved out of relationships, not because they were bad, but because they were too small for where you're going. You were silenced in circles, not because your voice lacked power, but because the room lacked reverence for what you carried. You were overlooked, not because you lacked value, but because heaven refused to let your purpose be reduced to popularity. This is how God works. Before visibility comes invisibility. Before public revelation comes private refinement. He took you into the quiet, not to make you question yourself, but to train your spirit to hear only Him. And while others rushed to be seen, God was crafting something within you that could not be microwaved. Because what's being built in you isn't surface level, it's substance, it's anointing, it's weight, and that takes time. You've walked through spiritual chambers, the kind no one else could enter, where character is forged in fire, and identity is sealed in solitude, and you may not have understood it then. The loneliness, the divine disconnection, the feeling that nothing made sense. But now, heaven is pulling back the curtain. Not because your preparation is ending, but because your unveiling is beginning. And here's the truth you need to carry with you. You were never behind. You were being built. So don't resent the seasons of silence. Don't regret the places where no one clapped. Because those were the exact spaces where heaven was doing its greatest work in you. Now that the silence has done its job, now that your heart has been molded, now that your roots have grown deep, the next phase begins. But before we step into what comes next, take a moment. Breathe. Let your soul settle into this truth. You weren't hidden to be forgotten. You were hidden to be revealed. There are moments in life when your soul starts to feel the weight of being set apart, not rejected, not forgotten, but consecrated. And at first, it's hard to tell the difference. You look around and wonder why the same rooms no longer fit, why certain friendships have quietly dissolved, why the circles that once celebrated you now feel cold, distant, or disinterested, why the places that once energized you now feel like a cage. But hear this. This is not abandonment. It's alignment. When God begins to elevate a soul, the first thing He does is remove the noise. He pulls you from places that were never meant to witness your transformation, because transformation requires separation. Enoch walked with God and then was no more. Not because he was lost, but because he was lifted. That's what sacred isolation looks like. It's not punishment, it's proximity. It's not exile, it's encounter. You've been walking through hidden places where only God could reach you, places where no audience clapped, but angels stood near, places where no affirmation was given but identity was confirmed, and yes, it hurt. The silence, the distance, the misunderstanding. But what you didn't see was what was happening beneath the surface. You were being changed. Your perspective refined. Your discernment sharpened. Your heart humbled. Your soul anchored. Because before God releases someone publicly, He must solidify them privately. You cannot carry eternal weight with fragile roots. You cannot handle divine assignment with divided attention. So He stripped away what distracted you, not to leave you empty, but to make room for the sacred. This is the cost of the calling, to be misunderstood by man but known by heaven, to be pulled away from crowds so you can walk closer with God, to be removed from noise so you can recognize the whisper, because the whisper is where the assignment is given. Think of Elijah. He wasn't called in thunder. He wasn't confirmed in fire. He met God in the stillness, in the soundless presence of glory, and that's what you've encountered. You may not have realized it, but those lonely seasons were actually sacred rooms of encounter. God wasn't ignoring you. He was engraving you, marking you for something the world hasn't seen yet, but soon will. So don't mourn the isolation. Don't fight the hiddenness. You are being prepared by the same God who sees in secret and rewards in the open. If this word is speaking to something deep within you, comment "I'm still here" below, not for others, but for you, to declare that you didn't disappear. You were being developed. To be chosen is to be misread. You do not walk this path because it's easy or because it grants you admiration. You walk it because you were summoned. And when God places a mantle on your life that others cannot see, the most common reaction from the world around you is confusion, not because you're unclear, but because your clarity convicts, because your silence speaks louder than their noise, because your restraint highlights their recklessness. There is a weight, heavy, silent, invisible, that only the chosen carry, the weight of being misunderstood. They saw your withdrawal and called it pride. They watched your boundaries and called them arrogance. They questioned your peace and assumed apathy. They could not understand why you were not running with the crowd. And so they assumed you were lost, but you weren't lost. You were led. There is no language for divine direction when others only know human logic. So when God begins to reposition you, pulling you into places of depth, requiring you to let go of shallow attachments, the world will not applaud. It will criticize. It will accuse. It will mislabel your transformation as rebellion. Even Jesus, the most pure soul to walk this earth, was misunderstood at every turn, by the religious, by his family, by his friends. He healed and was hated. He withdrew and was doubted. He wept and was questioned. So do not expect your process to be packaged in applause. Your life will often speak a language only heaven understands. There is no human explanation for why you chose the harder path. No logic behind your forgiveness when you had every right to retaliate. No reason to keep showing up when all you received was silence, yet you did, because there's something in you that is not of this world. And that something is what threatens the comfort of others. You became a mirror, unintentionally exposing what they were unwilling to confront. Your consistency revealed their compromise. Your stillness challenged their striving. Your humility disrupted their hunger for validation. And so, rather than ask why you walk the way you do, they rejected the path altogether. They dismissed you, not because you were wrong, but because you were different. But the chosen are always different. You were never meant to blend in. You were never meant to be easily understood, quickly categorized, or comfortably explained. You were meant to be revealed, not defined. You were meant to be witnessed, not contained. So when you feel that ache, that invisible sting of being overlooked, judged, or reduced to what people think they know, remember this. You were hidden, not to be explained, but to be preserved. Because God never asks the world's permission before he chooses a soul, and he certainly doesn't consult public opinion before he lifts one. There are wounds you carry that no one will ever see. Not because they are shallow, but because they run too deep for language. Because they were inflicted in sacred places during silent seasons when no one was watching but God. These are not the kind of wounds that seek sympathy. They do not cry for validation. They bleed quietly, they heal slowly, and they transform completely. These are the wounds of the chosen. You see, when God sets you apart for something eternal, he does not prepare you on public stages. He prepares you in private furnaces. And in that furnace, everything that cannot carry the weight of your calling is burned away. Your ego, your pride, your need for applause, your desire to be understood. It is in this place that silent obedience becomes sacred strength. You kept walking when everything around you said stop. You kept believing when logic screamed give up. You kept forgiving when bitterness would have made more sense. And you did it without recognition, without thanks, without an audience. That's why you carry an authority others can't fake. Because what you've endured wasn't for performance. It was for purification. There were nights when your heart shattered, and all you could do was breathe. But even in that breath, heaven heard worship. There were moments when you bit your tongue so hard it bled, because you refused to speak death over what God was still healing. And though no one else clapped, God recorded every second as intercession. This is why you carry weight when you walk into a room, not because of status, not because of followers, but because you've been crushed and kept your faith intact. You're not here by accident. You are the product of 1,000 hidden surrenders, 1,000,000 whispered yeses to God when it would have been easier to say no. You became strong not by resisting pain, but by embracing the process. And now, when you speak, there's oil. When you pray, there's power. When you move, there's purpose. Because you didn't just go through it. You grew through it. You learned how to hear God in silence, how to see through deception, how to discern without doubting, how to stand still in a storm that was designed to take you out. These are things that cannot be taught. They must be forged. You became the weapon the enemy regrets ever wounding, and the very scars that once made you feel unworthy. They now shine as seals of your assignment, proof that the crushing didn't destroy you, it refined you. So, chosen one, don't hide your wounds. Don't minimize your survival. Don't shrink your story to fit into rooms that can't hold your truth. Because what nearly broke you became the foundation that built you. And now, you carry something sacred, a strength shaped in silence, a grace born from groanings too deep for words. Your wounds were never a weakness. They were the evidence that you were always becoming. There comes a moment, quiet, sacred, irreversible, when heaven lifts the veil. It does not ask for your permission. It does not knock with warning. It simply reveals what had been, growing in silence all along. And when that unveiling comes, everything shifts, not just around you, but within you. You no longer seek to be seen, because now you know you were never truly hidden. You were reserved, protected, sealed. Like Moses in the wilderness, like Elijah in the cave, like Jesus before the tomb broke open. You begin to walk differently, not with arrogance but with quiet authority, not with noise but with clarity, not with the need to explain, but with the peace of someone who has nothing left to prove. You carry weight now. Not the weight of striving, but the weight of assignment. What once felt like delay, you now recognize as divine design. What once felt like rejection, you now see as redirection. What once made no sense, now speaks louder than words ever could. You understand now. God didn't hide you to punish you. He hid you to prepare you, and in that hiding, you were remade. You are not who you used to be. You are not returning to old circles, old patterns, old titles. You are not re-entering rooms as the same version they remember, because the you that was hidden is not the you that is rising. You're not back for attention. You're not walking into visibility to say, look at me. You're walking in to say, look at him, the one who carried me through fire and formed me in silence. What's unfolding now is not about exposure, it's about embodiment. You are the evidence that consecration still matters, that obedience still has fruit, that silent faithfulness still produces harvests, even if they take years to bloom. And here's what no one can deny. Your presence now says more than your explanations ever did. Your life has become a message. Your posture has become a prophecy. Your walk has become worship. You are not here to impress. You are here to impact. And so you walk, not faster, not louder, not heavier, but with the rhythm of someone aligned with heaven's pace. You're no longer obsessed with who stayed or who left. You no longer waste time proving what God has already confirmed. You've tasted too much stillness to settle for noise. You've walked with God too long to go back to crowds who only applauded your performance, but never recognized your process. This is your unveiling. Not with lights, not with fanfare, but with fire in your bones and purpose in your steps. You are finally stepping into what was always yours, not because you chased it, but because you were chosen for it. And when they ask, where have you been? You won't need to say a word. Your peace will answer for you. There is a kind of pain that language fails to define, not because it lacks words, but because it was never meant to be explained, only experienced. It is the pain of invisibility, of being present but unseen, of sowing into spaces that never acknowledged your seed, of growing in silence while watching others reap loudly. And yet, beneath that ache, there lies something divine, something holy, something few ever recognize unless they've walked through it themselves. Because what the world called delay, heaven called divine weight training. Being hidden is not the absence of purpose, it is the preparation for purpose. It is the sacred tension between what is promised and what is revealed. And that tension builds strength, endurance, wisdom. You weren't just sitting still, you were being strengthened in stillness. Every moment of invisibility was forming muscles your calling would one day require. Not physical, but spiritual. Emotional, eternal, muscles to carry what others could not see, muscles to walk where others could not follow, because the weight of being chosen is not light. God does not entrust his glory to the easily shaken. He doesn't place destiny into hands still seeking applause. He prepares those he calls, and he does it in obscurity. Before David could sit on a throne, he had to learn how to be faithful with sheep. Before Joseph could govern a nation, he had to serve in a prison. And before you could be revealed, you had to be refined. Not because you were weak, but because your assignment is weighty. You've endured the stripping away of layers you once thought were essential. Identities, relationships, environments, even dreams. Not to leave you empty, but to leave you available for something eternal. Because God does not fill what is already full. He does not pour fresh oil into a vessel that clings to the past. He first empties, then cleanses, then fills. And your invisibility, your sacred stretch of solitude, was part of that process. You weren't overlooked. You were set apart. But that separation comes with cost. It isolates you. It forces you into inner chambers where the noise of the world cannot reach you, but neither can the affirmation of man. And in those spaces, you start to question your worth, your timing, your purpose. You wonder if you missed it, if you were disqualified. If your silence was proof of God's absence, but it wasn't. It was proof of his nearness. Because God whispers in stillness, and he hides what he loves. You see, oil is not extracted in public. It's crushed in the secret place. Diamonds are not formed in the spotlight. They are forged under pressure and in darkness. And so are you. You have been shaped by what others never saw, molded in moments no one will ever applaud. And that is your glory, not that you rose, but that you were refined before rising. You didn't just survive silence, you stewarded it. You didn't just wait, you worshipped. You didn't just disappear, you were being delivered from everything that would have diluted your destiny. So now, when the veil begins to lift and people start noticing your presence again, they won't understand. They'll wonder where you've been, why you changed, how you've grown. But you'll know the truth. You were in the hands of the potter. Hidden, yes, but not forgotten. Covered, yes, but not cancelled. Protected, yes, because what God was building in you had to be sealed until the appointed time. And now, that time draws near. If this resonates with you, if this feels like the confirmation your soul has been aching for, then type, "I've been hidden for glory," in the comments. Say it not to be seen by others, but to declare aloud what heaven has always known. Let your agreement be a signpost to your own spirit. You are no longer buried. You are being built. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Not for content, but for clarity. Because what we share here is not performance, it is prophecy. And your journey is sacred ground. There comes a moment, sacred, still, and unstoppable, when the soul finally understands what the silence was always saying. You were never being ignored. You were never being punished. You were being preserved. Your journey wasn't random. Your isolation wasn't a mistake. Every closed door, every unanswered prayer, every misunderstood season was heaven's way of marking you for something greater than visibility. It was purpose. The world called it delay, but God called it design. You weren't hidden because you were weak. You were hidden because you were weighty. Carriers of divine assignment cannot be rushed. They must be refined. They must be tested. They must be trusted. And now, chosen one, your season of unveiling has come. You don't need to explain where you've been. You don't need to justify your silence. Your fruit will speak. Your posture will preach. Your presence will now carry what only heaven could have placed inside of you. What once looked like being overlooked was actually divine orchestration, and what once felt like loneliness was sacred preparation. You were not left behind. You were set apart, and now every scar becomes a sign. Every tear becomes testimony. Every hidden act of obedience becomes oil. You carry the evidence of endurance. You carry the fragrance of fire. You carry the authority of one who was called not by man, but by God himself. So walk forward, not with pride, but with purpose. Not with noise, but with clarity. Not seeking attention, but honoring alignment. The world doesn't need your performance, it needs your presence. The presence of someone who has truly walked with God in the quiet, who knows what it means to be crushed and still remain faithful, who understands that the highest form of calling is not being seen, but being sent. And you have been sent, not to impress, but to impact, not to shine, but to reveal, not to rise above people, but to rise into purpose. So guard your altitude, protect your oil, steward your silence, and never again confuse stillness with stagnation, because now the veil is lifting. You were hidden for such a time as this, and now you walk. If this message stirred something deep within you, if your spirit knows it was crafted for you, not just spoken to you, type Amen in the comments. Not to be seen, but to agree with heaven. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, because what's coming next is not just more content, it's confirmation, calling, and covering for the chosen. You are not left behind. You are being prepared, and now your unveiling has begun.